But there is something to me magical about the Mississippi River. I mean, besides its importance to the culture and the history of this part of the United States, there's still something magical.
From the river to the valley to the sea. All the places, all the people.
Welcome to the Mississippi Valley Traveler Podcast. I'm Dean Klinkenberg, and I've been exploring the deep history and rich culture of the people and places along America's greatest river, the Mississippi, since 2007. Join me as I go deep into the characters and places along the river and occasionally wander into other stories from the Midwest and other rivers. Read the episode show notes and get more information on the Mississippi at MississippiValleyTraveler.com. Let's get going. Welcome to episode 8 of the Mississippi Valley Traveler Podcast, and another episode in this mini-series on fall travel along the Great River Road. I have the pleasure of talking with Kim Williams, who's an Arkansas-based travel writer, and we spend our time talking about fall travel along the Great River Road in Arkansas, some of the highlights, where you might be able to find a little bit of fall color in the trees. But we also talk a little bit about food and some events coming up, particularly the King Biscuit Blues Festival coming up in October. And we touch on planning that the folks in Arkansas are doing for the 2024 total eclipse. You might want to start making your plans now if you're interested in that. Quick shout out to all of the Patreon supporters again. I deeply appreciate your support. And thanks for listening to the podcast. And now let's get on to the interview. Kim Williams is an Arkansas-based travel writer specializing in the eastern part of the state where the Mississippi River runs. She's director of the Mississippi River Parkway Commission in Arkansas, what we know as the Great River Road, and is also project manager for the 2024 Great American Eclipse in Arkansas tourism promotion. I can't wait to hear about that too.
Oh, yeah.
She's previously worked for the U.S. Forest Service and as development director for the Delta Cultural Center in Helena, West Helena. Welcome to the podcast, Kim.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. And I loved how you told me that you found me, which was through Twitter. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And I think I've probably been following you for a little while. I enjoy seeing your updates from Arkansas because I haven't been traveling as much to the south recently. So I'm looking forward to following up on some of the places you highlight here in the next few months. So,
well, we're excited. Just head south anytime. I'd be happy to meet you. Take you to eat some great barbecue.
Oh, I'm always down for barbecue. So that's easy. I understand that you grew up in the Delta. Can you tell me a little bit about that, where you grew up and what your connection is to that part of the state?
Sure. I was born in Marianna, which is, to give a little bit of reference, it's between Forest City and historic Helena. I'm about 45 miles from West Memphis. Born and raised here, still live here by choice. One of the many cool things about my job is that we have 3 travel writers for Arkansas tourism. In fact, I do believe the last time I heard, we're the only state tourism office that has dedicated travel writers in their state. So I cover the eastern section, and I work from home in essence because I do travel quite a bit. So it wouldn't make sense to have me in Little Rock and then, having to drive over in eastern Arkansas. So I was born and raised here, went to college actually in the Arkansas Delta at Arkansas State University. And I have always, and this is a true fact, I have always had a love for the Mississippi River. And I can't tell you why. I remember being very, very young, maybe 4, 5, 6 years old. And my dad would take me out to see the river because there are some great places near Marianna. One is where the St. Francis and the Mississippi meet, the confluence of the two. And it was just always a magical place to me. And there is just something, I love going to Helena. even though I worked in Helena for 10 years, anytime still when I go down there, they have a wonderful river walk that extends out into the river. But there is something to me magical about the Mississippi River. I mean, besides its importance to the culture and the history of this part of the United States, there's still something magical. And, I love it. And so I've had this job, I guess it will be 16 years come November.
Wow.
And actually, it will be because I started in November of 2006. So, but I've always loved Arkansas, always had an immense love of the Arkansas Delta. And so when I became the director of Arkansas section of the Great River Road, I thought, that's as Oprah would call it, a full circle moment because, being able to not only promote the Arkansas Delta, but to also promote the Mississippi River and the wonderful tourism attractions we have along the Mississippi River, it's just been a dream come true.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, I completely agree with you. There is something magical about spending
Hmm.
time along the river. And one of the things that I think is special about it is that it changes so much from visit to visit. And we're about to head into fall. At least some of
Hmm.
us further north are already in fall at this point, I
Yes.
think. But I'm kind of curious. How do you know when fall begins down along the Arkansas part of the Mississippi River?
Well, it's not by the temperature. I was very excited. Like this morning, I had to get up and go do a live radio show, and which is about 30 minutes away. And so I got up about 5:30, and I first thing I did was ask Google what the temperature was, and it was 58 degrees. Now that is my kind of weather. So I go to a local radio station, and they do an hour-long morning show, and I had mentioned it on air, and the guy was like, "Well, don't get too excited because next week we're going to be in the upper 90s again." So we we don't know when it's fall other than by the calendar, and that's one of the very interesting things we talk about the river. So historic Helena is right there on the river, and every October, the weekend before the Columbus Day holiday, they host King Biscuit Blues Festival, which is a very well known blues festival. And so I have worked the blues festival as a volunteer for probably nearly 20 years. And the thing about it, it's always, around the first or second weekend in October, and you never know what to expect. There have been years where I would have to bring quilts with me because it would be so cold. Then there have been times that, a t-shirt and shorts and you're still burning up. It could, there could be 5 inches of rain or there could be no rain. And so, we have that saying, if you don't like the weather in Arkansas, stick around because it's going to change very quickly. So and even, we talk about the Mississippi River, and, I don't know that a lot of people realize that, we always hear about go to the Northeast, go to the Vermonts, go to the Maines to see the beautiful fall colors. All along the Mississippi River has some stunning fall color, but it's definitely going to be at different times. Even within Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas, up near the Fayetteville area, they usually start getting their fall color mid to late September. Here in the Arkansas Delta, we won't see it until the first to the middle of October. So it's much like that along the length of the 10 states that make up the Great River Road. So you can start up in Minnesota and or Wisconsin, and they may be already getting fall color, but we're not down here. But if you do want to go on a road trip, come to Arkansas because our cotton is in full bloom and it is absolutely stunning.
So
Absolutely stunning.
So tell me a little bit about the fall progression then. You mentioned fall colors. Are there particular places along the Great River Road in Arkansas where a visitor might get a good dose of fall colors, and what could they expect to see?
Um, I'll tell you one of the best places would be the St. Francis National Forest, which actually is almost in my backyard. It runs between Marianna and Helena. It's one of the smallest, I think it's the second smallest national forest. But it has a lot of hardwood, and it has a very diverse species of hardwood. And part of it is along Crowley's Ridge, which I don't know if you or your listeners are familiar, but that's a geological formation that runs from the Boot Hill of Missouri all the way down to Helena. And so that is a great place to see a variety of fall color. Um, Anywhere really, especially up in the northeastern section of Arkansas, let's say near the Wilsons or near Johnny Cash's boyhood home in Dice, Blytheville, there's going to be beautiful fall color on the trees that are there. But with the national forest, there are so many trees, and it's just a great place to go and see some color. I
Mm-hmm.
know that, and we talk about fall color, and that is a very important part for tourism in any state that actually says, "Hey, come see our fall color." But it's so hard to predict. It all depends on the weather. We just talked about in the South. I mean, all of the states in this area, you never know what the weather's going to bring. And so, how much rain did we get? When was the first frost? When was this? And it's all so dependent on what our fall color is going to look like. But again, it's a great time to also get out. I know that I had to go with my dad to Memphis on Monday, and we noticed that a lot of people are already cutting rice. So if you're interested in agriculture, it's a great time to be in Eastern Arkansas because, as I said, the cotton's in full bloom. They're cutting a lot of different crops, and just driving through the back roads of Arkansas, it's absolutely beautiful.
So from now until through the fall, then you have this progression of agricultural harvest going on. So right
Absolutely.
now in the fields, the cotton plants have those giant white balls all over them, right?
Yes.
Those puffs
They're
of white.
not Yes, they're not at what I like to call, the snow look yet, which, it's completely bloomed out. But you can see a lot of white. It's not at full, at least in my part of Eastern Arkansas, but it's still beautiful. But when it's going to be at its peak, probably in another week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, it will just look like fields of snow.
Mm.
And it's absolutely beautiful. And I always love, now, I don't do it without someone's permission, but I always love to go out into a cotton field that's in full bloom. I mean, it's just beautiful. And you
Fantastic.
can take some amazing selfies, by the way,
I bet.
just for visitors that may want to come down and just lay down in a cotton field. It's pretty darn impressive.
So what else do you think a visitor might expect from fall travel along Arkansas's portion of the Great River Road? We talked. I'll
Well,
come back to the King Biscuit Blues Festival in just a minute because I'd like to
oh,
talk
sure.
a little bit more about that. But what else is going on in the fall along the Great River Road in Arkansas that visitors would love to experience?
Well, we're very excited because there's two projects, two museums that have been raising money over the past few years. They're still not ready to move into new facilities, but that is the National Cold War Center in Blytheville. They had the Acre Air Force Base, and when the Cold War was over and they left, they just took everything. I mean, they just left everything as it was. So it's still looking like it was in the 1980s. So there is a section that you can go in and see. They have a great exhibit on the Air Force Base. And another one is the Sultana Disaster Museum. So many people do not know the story of the Sultana. Now, you can ask anybody from 8 to 80, hey, do you know what the Titanic is? Well, of course they do. Of course, that little movie had a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
But the Sultana is still America's worst maritime disaster. And it happened in April of 1865 with a lot of Union soldiers that had been prisoners of war. And it blew up and killed, I believe, nearly 1,100 people. And they are building a museum. They are in an interim space now. It's the only one. I mean, there are a lot of places that have special monuments and things to the Sultana, but no one has a museum.
Hmm.
And so that is in Marion, because it actually blew up nearer Marion than it did Memphis. And like I said, they're working hard on that. But in both locations, you can see either the interim museum at the Sultana Disaster Museum or a great exhibit on the Air Force Base at the National Cold War Center. I called it museum, but it's the National Cold War Center. And both of those are one of a kind
Hmm.
museums in the world. So we're very excited about that. You know, of course, anytime is a good time to go see the Johnny Cash Boyhood Home in Dice. I do have to say, I was always very respectful of Johnny Cash. I mean, his music, his importance to Arkansas. But when they opened that museum and I went for the first time, I realized that Johnny Cash was a person. He wasn't just the legendary man in black. And I have become such a huge fan. And, he talks about how important his life in Arkansas was, especially growing up in Dice. And it's just, and every time I go, I see something different. And in case your listeners don't know about it, you actually go into the house that the Cash family lived in. And his remaining siblings, which are Joanne and Tommy Cash, really worked with Arkansas State University, who um, owns the site, to make it as it was when the Cash family lived there. And they have Johnny's mother, Carrie. They have her piano. And I mean, they worked with, this is exactly the couch that we had, and they found a couch just like it. They found in another house that, the exact flooring that the Cash family had. And it just is amazing to walk in there and see. And this time of year with the fall, um, it's actually, the house is actually in the middle of a field. And I don't know if they planted cotton this year, but in the past they have. And so you're pulling up and there could just be these beautiful white fields of cotton. And then there's the little, 5-room house that Johnny Cash grew up from the time he was 3 to 18 when he left for the Air Force. So that is a great place to experience fall in Arkansas.
Awesome. I had one of those lucky moments of travel a few years back. I forget exactly what year this was, but it was the year the museum opened. I just happened
Hmm.
to be driving through that area on the day they were doing the VIP tours before opening to the public. And I was able to sneak in and at least take a look at the museum. That's in an old movie house, I think,
Yes,
in the middle of town.
yes,
Yeah. Uh,
yes.
and the exhibits I thought were really fantastic. They really gave a good picture, as you said, of the man behind the
Mhm.
music. So I think that's a fantastic site, and it's just a short few miles off Interstate 55, so it's an easy place to get to.
Absolutely. But once you get off 55 going to Dice, and I should be able to tell you what actual exit it is, but I can't think of that right now. But you are literally put into the world that Johnny Cash grew up in, because all around are agricultural fields. And, it amazes me. Of course, I had heard 5 Feet High and Rising my entire childhood. I mean, my dad loved Johnny Cash, but not even as a little kid knowing that he is talking about the flood of 37, and when he was growing up and the chickens were up in the trees. And so it really is one of those come together moments that you think, wow, this begat this. And so yeah, it's really amazing place. And I will tell you another great location, simply 14 miles across from the interstate, is a little community called Wilson. And Wilson was a company town owned by R.E.L. Wilson. And he, during his height, was the biggest farm owner in the United States. I mean, he had thousands and thousands and thousands of acres. And so he traveled a lot with his wife, and he fell in love with the Tudor architecture of Great Britain. And so you go in this downtown, and he built all the buildings in Tudor style.
Mm.
And there's a great museum, and I'm not just saying it's great because it's one of our 52 Arkansas state parks, but the Hampson Museum, um, Hampson Archaeological Museum State Park, and it tells the story of the Native Americans that lived in the area of Wilson. They've got, great little shops and a restaurant, and it's just a great place to spend the day. And again, literally right on the Great River Road, Highway 61. And it's just beautiful.
Yeah, the
So
Hamp.
that's
Yeah,
so
it's
you just put them
awesome.
together, and yeah.
Wilson is a pretty little town, and I didn't know the full history of that. And it's one of those things on my list of things to learn more about. But I've been to the Hampson Museum a couple
Mhm.
of times, including once when they were in the old. It was almost a trailer, from what I remember. Or
It was
yeah,
so small.
right.
Yes.
But man, they have some fantastic artifacts, like statues and pottery,
Yes.
masks. Just it's a fascinating place to walk through to see these reminders
It
of
is.
the. I think they were a Mississippian era culture, so just
Yes.
after Cahokia had collapsed, kind of in that period of time before DeSoto and his army arrived in that part of the country.
Exactly. And it is an amazing story. They were very advanced, as many of the Native American tribes were in this area. But it tells a story unlike any other that you will find in this area. And then I have to give a shout out. There is a great shop called White's Mercantile, and it is owned by the granddaughter of Hank Williams Sr. She's also the daughter of Hank Williams Jr. But anyway, Holly Williams. And she has shops in Franklin, Tennessee, and in Nashville, and in several places. But she was friends with someone that lived in Wilson, came down. It really is an interesting story because someone, I believe, from St. Louis, his name's Galen Lawrence, wanted to buy the farmland around Wilson. And they were like, we're just going to sell you the whole town. So he has come in, he has put money in, and he is making this a tourism destination. Well, Holly happened to come down and fell in love with the area, and so you can go to the Hampson Museum, and then you can go have lunch at the Wilson Cafe, and then you can go over to White's Mercantile, or you can go to the Grange where they have fresh fruits and vegetables, and teach classes and all these good things. I mean, Wilson is just an awesome little town,
Mm.
and they are making it a tourist destination, and we are thrilled about that.
Yeah, it's definitely worth the stop. And I didn't have a chance to try the restaurant when I was there, but I'm going to have to do that next time.
Oh, please.
Yeah.
Yes, you have to. Yes.
If you're enjoying the show, share that love with other people. Leave a review on iTunes or your preferred podcast app. Each review makes a difference and helps other fans of the Mississippi River and the Midwest find this show. Let's come back to the King Biscuit Blues Festival then for just a minute.
Sure.
That's coming up. I think I have these dates right. October 5th to the 8th
Yes,
in
yep,
Helena.
in Helena.
Tell me what people can expect from this festival, and it's been going on for decades, right? This
It
is one of the
has.
oldest.
It started in 1986, and it started out very, very small, very small. In fact, one of the Arkansas Delta's most loved sons played the first year, Levon Helm. And of course, Levon spent so much time there after the band broke up, and he would still come to Marvel, and he had family and friends, and so yeah, and so this is, I should know the number, 35th. It's not on their website, but this is literally considered one of the best blues festival in the South for several reasons. A lot of people just want to come because of the history of King Biscuit, and I'll give just a little bit about that. It all started with a radio show called King Biscuit Time that started in November of 1941 at KFFA radio station. And it was a new radio station, and These guys came in. One of them was Sonny Boy Williamson. The other one was Robert Lockwood Jr. and said, "Hey, we want a show. We want to do a show." And they were like, "Well, yeah, but you have to have a sponsor." So they suggested a sponsor, and that was King Biscuit Flour. And so it became King Biscuit Time. And it now is still broadcast live from the Delta Cultural Center Museum in downtown Helena. It is the longest running daily blues show in the United States and most likely, possibly the world. I mean, they have more shows. I mean, they're probably by now in 16 or 17,000. I'm probably a little off, but more shows than, say, the Grand Ole Opry. But the Grand Ole Opry is on weekends. But people like B.B. King, you read, and he was one of the headliners in the 30th annual King Biscuit Blues Festival. And he, in interviews, talks about he would be in the cotton fields in Mississippi picking cotton, and at lunch, they would listen to King Biscuit and Sonny Boy Williamson and Robert Lockwood. One of my favorite stories, because I'm such a huge Levon Helm fan, Levon would skip school and get a ride to the radio station and would go in and watch Sunshine Sonny Payne, who passed away sadly a few years ago. But he would sit there and watch Mr. Sonny do the show. And I mean, I have had more people, as I mentioned, I worked at the Delta Cultural Center for 10 years. And people would come in and you just never knew who to expect. I remember one day, Bruce Hornsby walked in. He had his young son with him, and he was doing the blues trail, if you will, Mississippi, Memphis. He wanted to come to Helena to teach his son about the importance of blues music. But one day I was working the front desk, and the sun is coming through the glass front doors, and you can't really tell who you're about to see. And I see this gentleman. I thought, goodness, he looks familiar. He had on a hat. He come up and he started talking, and I'm like, oh my goodness, it's Elvis Costello. And Elvis had been doing a recording an album in Memphis. He was doing some, I think, in Clarksdale, and he came over just to meet Sunshine Sonny Payne. And I mean, just tons of people. And, I know that Robert Plant of Led Zeppelin used to come and spend time in Helena. And I mean, that radio show, King Biscuit Time, was really the beginning of blues on the Arkansas side of the river. I'll put it that, not taking anything away from Clarksdale or from Memphis or any of the others. But so in 1986, a bunch of them got together and said, hey, let's put on a festival. And it started out with the back of a trailer. And people would get up on the trailer and perform. And, you never knew who would show up. I know one year, John F. Kennedy Jr. showed up. I believe Whoopi Goldberg's showed up one year. But now it has either 5 or 6 stages. It takes up 6 blocks of historic Cherry Street, which is right downtown. The main stage, it's like bring your own seating. Well, you're seated on part of the Mississippi River levee. And there is just something magical about it because they are so committed to the history of blues music. There's a gospel stage, there's a kids stage, and this year now we've not had one since COVID. 2019 was the last festival, so we didn't have it in 2020, 2021. So we're getting ready with 2022, and yeah, it does start. We have what's called Warm Up Wednesday on the day before the festival officially kicks off, and one of Arkansas's greatest performers, even though he was born in Mississippi, but he still calls Arkansas his home, and that's Bobby Rush. So Bobby Rush will be performing live free the Wednesday of the Blues Festival. On Thursday, the headliners are the Kentucky Headhunters and the Fabulous Thunderbirds with Kim Wilson. On Friday, And I'm so excited about this. But the main headliners are the Paul Thorne Band, which I've become really good friends with all those guys. Love them. And Mavis Staples. And I really
Mm.
want, I work in artist hospitality at King Biscuit. I just want to sit down and talk to Mavis Staples about the last waltz and, the wait and leave on him. And so Mavis is on Friday night, and then Saturday night, the headliner is the Devon Allman Project, and I believe that's Greg Allman's son. It's one of the
Hmm.
Allman sons. And so, yeah, but here's another great thing about King Biscuit. First of all, you will hear as many foreign accents as you will Southern accents because there is a huge international crowd that comes every year. Great food. People are just having fun and just enjoying it. And again, we always hope for really good weather, like not 90 degrees, but not 40. So we'll see. But King Biscuit is a free festival. The only thing you pay for to see a stage is if you're in front of the main stage. There's like VIP seating. Every other stage is completely free. You can walk up and down through the festival and not pay a dime. Other than, of course, if you want something to eat or drink, and there's craft booths and tons of food and drinks, and there is something special about it, and
Hmm.
just you feel the history of the blues and the culture of the Arkansas Delta at King Biscuit.
So for folks who might want to stick around for a couple of days, where would be the places to stay? There's probably quite a few hotels in the West Helena area over toward Clarksdale, but
Yes, that
where?
everything I can tell you, everything in Helena is already sold out. I can tell you that. But you can stay in Clarksdale. You can go to nearby Brinkley or Forest City. And, I'm not saying if anyone's interested not to call the hotels or the B&Bs in Helena, but normally, now I say normally pre-COVID, they would book their hotels or their B&B room when they were there the previous year. So if they were there in, 2018, they would say, "Hey, I want to book now." So that, everything would be done up. And then there is a casino right across the river, the Isle of Capri. They, of course, have rooms, and it's one of those times where, yes, we have a little bit of a competition, if you will, tourism wise, from Mississippi or Tennessee or things like that. But there are so many people that come to King Biscuit. We need all of our states to be together so we can provide rooms. We're also going to see that happen a lot with the eclipse of 2024 as well. So,
Right.
yeah. But King Biscuit, if it's something you've never been to, and if you love music and not just blues music, I mean, all kinds of genres of music, it is a great, great place to be. It really is.
And I'll post a link to the festival website in the show notes so people can check that
That's
out
great.
and maybe make some last minute plans to come down there. Like even if you had to, I'm trying to get my geography down here. Even if you had to stay in like West Memphis,
Hmm.
we're talking hour 15 or so
Yeah,
maybe to get
about
down to
that.
Helena.
Yeah, Memphis,
Yeah.
because Memphis is about an hour. So West Memphis, yeah, and of course we would love for you to stay in Arkansas, but so yeah, and it's right there, on 61, and so you've got 4 lane or you know, 4 lane highways and or two on each side, separated with a median, and it's a good drive. It's a beautiful drive too because you're in the Mississippi Delta, and you know anything that you could find around the area would be really good. And there's some
Hmm.
camping options. We have the Mississippi River State Park, and that falls between Marianna and Helena. As I was talking about, the St. Francis National Forest, we actually have a state park within the national forest, and so there is you know an agreement. The state park actually handles now all of the recreation within the 26 or 22,000 acre national
Hmm.
forest. So there are campgrounds and some what relatively new camper cabins and things like that. So for people that love to camp, that would be a great opportunity as well.
All right. Well, I want to take a few minutes to talk about food, one of my
Ah,
absolutely favorite topics. I remember, I forget what year this was, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I stopped at a little cafe in Arkansas to get some catfish. And I was a little surprised because I got two questions I wasn't expecting.
okay.
Do you want do you want farm raised or wild caught? And do you want fillets or steaks?
Yes. That
So
listen.
tell me about these options.
Okay, well, first of all, growing up, and I am not a catfish eater. I'm going to be the first to admit, because my dad fished constantly when I was growing up, and they would just basically make me eat catfish. Now I will eat it now, and don't judge me, but I like to dip mine in mustard. But all right. But so especially in the '70s, my dad would whatever he caught, which he would catch in the lakes or the rivers, but not the Mississippi River. I don't know why. Don't even ask me. I don't know. Maybe it's the mud, but and he would do steaks, which will have bones in it, or and then he would also cut some into fillets. Now, my mother invariably would get choked on a bone if she was eating a catfish steak. Invariably, it just happened. And so nowadays, of course, they're both in their 70s, but he's getting ready to retire, and he has already got his lifetime Arkansas Game and Fish Commission fishing license. But now he only does fillets. So yes, there are still people that prefer the steak, which has that. I'm sitting here like people can see me, but has that sort of wishbone look. And then there are people that much prefer um, the fillets because there's not bones unless whoever cut it up just didn't do a great job. Now, pond raised or wild caught. So we have tons of lakes and streams and rivers in Arkansas. But we also have a lot of people that have pond raised catfish. So when they give you that choice, they either bought it fresh from a fisherman or they've had their, food company bring them in some fillets. And we have a lot of places around this area. In fact, Arkansas at one time, probably a decade or two ago, was one of the biggest exporters of catfish, and the state sort of got out of that. But all around us, there are still catfish farms. So that's what they were asking. You were good to go either way. What did you go with? Do you remember?
I think I went with the steak, yeah, because I hadn't really had that kind of a cut before
Hmm.
for it. That I got wild caught.
Yeah. And
The
that's, like I said, that's my dad's favorite, but my mom would always get choked on a bone. Because
yeah,
the catfish can have some of those. There's that one big bone that gives it, that look of sort of like a wishbone or something. But then there's tons of little bones in it too, so you have to pay attention. So yes, that is. And let me say, Arkansas. People always talk about the different states where they have their own specific food. Arkansas, we 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 are a true melting pot, and so we have two of our own foods that truly were created here, in case you don't know. And one of those is fried pickles. So people that go
mm,
out and eat these fried pickles, you can thank the people in Atkins, Arkansas, because there was a big pickle plant there back in the day. And the other one is cheese dip. Now, if there's anyone listening from Texas, I did not say queso. I said cheese dip. There's a difference. And I don't know if you know this, but several years ago in our nation's capital, there was a dip off. And it was a blind taste test between queso from Texas and cheese dip from Arkansas.
uh
Cheese dip won. Just saying, they're both great. But so those are two things that are inherently Arkansas. We still have some of the best barbecue that you will find. We still have some of the best catfish you will find. Biscuits, gravy, you name it. Um, and we have some great restaurants along the Great River Road. And we talked about barbecue. Now I have to give a plug to Arkansas's first James Beard Award winner because it is in my hometown of Marianna. I grew up eating Jones's Barbecue. There are 2 tables, there are 10 chairs, and Mr. Harold opens about 7 in the morning and he sells till he sells out. Now, on a weekend, that could be 8:30 in the morning. But it was voted an America's Classic, and it is not fancy. And you have basically 3 choices. You can get a barbecue sandwich on Wonder Bread with slaw, a sandwich on Wonder Bread without slaw, and you can buy it by the pound.
Mm.
And every once in a while, he may do, smoked sausage or something like that. But the visitation, and it's so wonderful because he has a guest book, and you will see people from every country on the globe that have come to eat barbecue at Jones's, and it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing.
Oh,
And then
well, that's going to be on
Blytheville,
my short list.
yeah, Blytheville, not far from you in St. Louis, has 6 renowned blues barbecue joints. And don't ask me to name them, but I know one is Dixie Pig and one's Cream Castle, and there's several ones, and there's actually a really good YouTube video on the Arkansas Tourism Channel on barbecue in Blytheville, and they're all different, of course. I will say barbecue, in my opinion, is probably one of the most subjective foods you'll find because it depends on where you grew up and the barbecue that you ate. Um, if you like a thin sauce or a thick sauce or whatever. But yeah, but you're not going to go wrong with barbecue in Arkansas for sure, for sure. We talked about the Wilson Cafe in Wilson, which is just absolutely amazing. But then we have um, little drive-ins or dairy bars that you'll find some great food. There's one in Marion called Tacker's Shake Shop. Wait, Shack, Shake Shack. Okay, now I know there's a national chain called the Shake Shack, and this isn't it. And they've been open since the early '70s. And the son of the original owners has a farm, and so he is actually doing farm to table. And it's
Hmm.
absolutely amazing. Like, for example, he grows his own muscadines, and his mom makes the family's muscadine jam recipe, and they have a muscadine bacon burger. Now, let me just tell
Oh.
you, let me say, just sitting here talking about muscadines, my mouth is already watering
Mm.
because, that tartness of them. And so I went in there, and I've been going for years, and they're like, we have some new items. One of them is a muscadine bacon burger. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Mm.
And it has cream cheese on it. And it is amazing. I mean, and
Right.
fabulous places like that, and all over the state. Arkansas is really becoming a pretty awesome foodie state, and so you
Hmm.
can find just about anything that you would want, like chocolate.
So,
Have you ever heard of
like what?
chocolate gravy?
No, I think I probably should though.
Oh, it is, yeah. And you'll find chocolate gravy. We believe it actually started in the Ozarks. Maybe it was the Missouri part and then came into Arkansas. We don't know. But you can Google it. It's fabulous. My grandmother always made it. Of course, my dad is one of 12, so she was making whatever she could to feed 12 kids. But it's basically cocoa and flour and sugar and butter. And depending on where you eat it, it could be more like a Hershey syrup. My grandmother always made it. It was almost like a hot pudding, and you pour it over
Hmm.
biscuits. And hers was not super sweet, but it was fabulous. So yeah, chocolate gravy. Check it
So,
out.
where am I going to find this along the Great River Road? Like, do you have a restaurant or a place or cafe you would recommend?
There are several just along the way. Just because, let's see, I'm trying to think what would be in Blytheville. Wilson Cafe doesn't do it. Tacker Shake Shack may have it. It's considered more of a winter thing. I'll tell you what,
Hmm.
though, there are a lot of places, where you can buy like soup mixes and stuff like that. There is an Arkansas company that sells chocolate gravy mix, and you put it on hot biscuits and you plop some butter on top. And I'm telling you, once you try it, well, I'll say this, you're either going to love it or hate it. And I did some informal research when I worked at the Delta Cultural Center, because either you grew up with chocolate gravy or you didn't. And it didn't have anything to do with race, religion, income. It was just either your family had it or your family didn't. My dad's
Hmm.
family did. My mom, who grew up 40 miles away from where my dad did, never had it and doesn't like it. And that's just wrong. But, everybody has to make their own decision.
So would the fried pickles and cheese dip be common enough that you could find them at a lot of different
Oh,
restaurants too, or
absolutely.
should we go to?
No,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So just look
All
for it on
over
the menu
all
and you'll.
over the state, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
And fried pickles for a long time, people would say what, but then they became more and more common. And really, I can go almost anywhere. I was actually in Toronto back in May, and they had fried pickles on the
Mm.
menu of the restaurant that I was at in Toronto, Canada. And I wanted to say, you are welcome. You can thank Arkansas for that. Now, I'm not going to get in the whole cheese dip thing, but yeah.
We don't want to start a
No, we
war
don't
here
want to
after
start a
all.
war.
That's
And
so.
like I said, I'll tell you why it got, and when I say ugly, jokingly ugly, but the Wall Street Journal had a story about Arkansas inventing cheese dip on their front page. And a lot of people in Texas got upset. Now, I know what you want to ask me. You want to ask me what's the difference in queso and cheese dip. I think queso is considered more chunky.
Hmm.
Um, but it doesn't matter. I've never met a queso or a cheese dip I didn't like. So, listen, I'll be the next time I go to Texas. Believe me, I'll be getting some homemade queso. But then
Right.
when I come back, or homemade queso, and then when I come back to Arkansas, I'll have some cheese dip. So it's all good.
So one thing I was curious about with all of the rice fields in Arkansas is rice a staple of the local diet too? Is it something you're going to see on restaurant menus?
Absolutely. Do you know that over the last few years, Arkansas now grows? The last number I heard was 52% of all of the rice grown in the United States comes from Arkansas. In fact, there are some blogs that I do. We have our monthly newsletter is called Discover Arkansas. And I like to use the hashtag the Arkansas Delta feeds the world. Um, rice is one of our biggest, but it's not our biggest. I believe soybeans are still our biggest. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, we eat rice. Stuttgart, Arkansas, which is actually called, and that is within the Great River Road region, is actually called the duck and rice capital of the world. If you want to get some amazing duck hunting, you go to
Hmm.
Stuttgart, Arkansas. It's also home to a little company called Riceland Rice, and then others. There's Producers Rice, and then I think another one. And so, yeah, I was noticing yesterday coming through that they are still some are cutting rice. There's still some that they're waiting on it to be harvested, but rice is a big big crop in Arkansas, but
Hmm.
still not our largest. At least the last
Well,
statistics I saw, and but I just happen to love rice, and I know a lot of people
yeah, me
don't, and I
too.
don't understand. My dad's not a big fan, but it was one of those things in the 40s and 50s that was readily available, and it was relatively cheap. So when your husband is a sharecropper and you have 12 children, as my grandmother did, you grow what you can and you buy what is relatively cheaper than anything else. So yeah, that's what you do.
Hmm. Absolutely. I'm a big fan of rice. I love it. So I'll have to look for some when I'm down in that area.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, we're kind of running down to the end of the time here, and but I wanted to ask about one more thing.
Sure.
I know that Arkansas has been developing a bike trail along the river, and I know that there's some sections are open and some are still kind
Yes.
of planned for down the road. Could you just tell us a little? Because this probably sounds like a great fall activity again
Oh,
too, to go
absolutely.
biking along there. Tell us a little bit about this bike
For
trail.
sure.
Where can people ride to?
It is the Delta Heritage Trail State Park. It started, it was a rails to trails conversion. And so it is along what would have been the old railroad track. And when it is completely developed, it will be 84 miles through the Arkansas Delta. Right now, it starts near Helena, and we have, I believe, 41 miles complete. I haven't looked lately, but um, part of it is on the north end, part of it is on the south end. So you can actually um, ride from near Helena down to past, we call it Elaine. Some people would call it Elaine, but we call it Elaine
Mm,
around here. And then in the southern end, Rower, which is or was a Japanese American internment camp during World War II. And actually, George Takei of Star Trek fame, he and his family were interred there for several months. In fact, there is a great museum in McGee, which is also along Arkansas's Great River Road, called the World War II Japanese American Internment Museum. George Takei was very involved. He was there on opening day, made some amazing remarks, and he's been very supportive of it. And so you can start there, and it's eventually going to go from there. Now you can go from near, I think it's Watson, and then go through Rower, and you're actually on the Mississippi River levee, and then you can go into Arkansas City, which is a great city that is literally right on the Mississippi River. And during the major
mm-hmm.
floods of 27, 37, destroyed some areas as a lot of places did. So, um, but yeah, Delta Heritage Trail, when it is finished, and they recently received a $20 million grant. And so I'm thinking that will help um, develop it even more quicker. A lot of people compare it to the Katy Trail, which I believe is in Missouri, and
Right.
this is I would say a little more rural in that you are going through forested area, and once it's complete,
Hmm.
you will have views of the Arkansas and the White River, and this is an area. We talk about wildlife and things that this writer guy you may have heard of, Ernest Hemingway. He would
Mm-hmm.
go, I believe it was dove hunting in the area near Watson and Rower and Arkansas City. And so, yeah, we have some great claim to him. We have the Hemingway, the Hemingway Pfeiffer Museum and Educational Center in Piggott, Arkansas. He married Pauline Pfeiffer. She, I believe, was his second wife. And the family, which were originally from St. Louis, were wealthy, and they took a barn and converted it for Ernest, and that's where he wrote a good part of "For Whom the Bell Tolls," I believe it was. So you can find
All
all
right.
that on Arkansas.com. And I don't want you to forget the eclipse, because that is our big thing coming. Um, I don't know what you Missouri folks did, but you guys had it in 2017, and now you're having it again in 2024. I mean, y'all should share the wealth, but you are sharing it with us. We in Arkansas, we only had a partial eclipse in 2017. Well, 53 of Arkansas' 75 counties are in the path of totality.
Well,
This is huge for Arkansas. And so I believe I looked, it's 570 days until April 8th, 2024. We are hoping for hundreds of thousands of visitors. Um, it's really interesting because the path of totality runs diagonally from Texarkana and then up to Jonesboro and Piggott and into Missouri there. But we're really, really excited. We, of course, have not had one in Arkansas since 1918. We won't have another one until 2045. So we're going to take
Hmm.
full advantage of this. You can learn more at arkansas.com/eclipse. But we're really, really excited. And, I'll also say that it is going to be, at least in regional news today, Arkansas was extremely, extremely blessed during the pandemic. A lot of state tourism offices and state tourism were hit hard. Arkansas is not called the natural state for nothing. And we
Hmm.
actually released our 2021 economic impact statement yesterday. And our numbers were up, like, in some cases, up 45%. And we had like 41 million visitors in 2021, and we're really excited about that. And so we are super excited about having additional visitors for the eclipse in April of 2024.
It really is a special experience to be, in this, to be around when the eclipse happens. In 2017, I was on an island in the Mississippi for the eclipse where we were in the path of totality. And I tell you, it's one of those memories that is going to be, one of my fundamental memories for the rest of my life. I think it's just an experience unlike anything else.
Yeah, every person so I have not experienced one, so I'm really, really excited about seeing one.
Now you have a hard time deciding where you're going to experience it from. You've got all those counties
I
to
do.
choose from.
And
So,
believe it or not, some people have been vying for me to come to their community. But a dear, dear friend of mine owns a lake house in Hot Springs, and where they have, Lake Hamilton and Lake Catherine and all these different lakes. And they are rebuilding their home because it was destroyed by a tree. And she said, I have a room for you by yourself. You don't have to share. You can come early and stay late because, one of the things, and I'm sure that you dealt with this, Dean, during 2017, is with an eclipse and you're doubling the population of your community, there are some problems with traffic. And we have
a
this
little
little
bit.
thing called Interstate 40 that runs through the heart of Arkansas, where on a normal day, my goodness, you could get stuck for hours. And so I had really been wanting to be somewhat off the radar on a back road or something like that, but I will be in the middle of Lake Hamilton on a boat where I will stay 2 to 3 days after the eclipse, so I won't be
Yes.
stuck on Interstates 30 and 40.
I think that's one of the secrets about this is don't be in a hurry to leave
No.
afterwards.
No,
So,
in fact, we are pushing the come early, stay late, and stay put. And it's not just because, we want people to spend money. I mean, it is a safety factor. There are the horror stories from 2017, people being stuck on highways and interstates 4, 6, 8, 10 hours. And if our visitors plan, we can, try to skirt some of those issues. So, but we're
right.
we're we're really excited, and so thanks to Missouri for at least sharing with us this go round, because y'all didn't in 2017. But I have to say, I was speaking to someone in Ohio, and they're in the path of totality this year, but they don't get another one until like 2412. And I'm like, well, I'm not
Well,
going to be around for the one in 2412 or whatever, 2400, whatever year it is. So yeah, eclipses are kind of crazy how they just happen to fall. So, but we're excited.
well, that sounds like, yeah, that sounds fantastic. So I'll post a link in the show notes too to the site
Thank you, thank you.
promoting the eclipse opportunities. So we are out of time now. Thank you so much, Kim, for taking the time out of your day
Anytime.
to talk with me. We'll probably have to have this conversation again somewhere down the road to talk about
Would
more
love
about
to.
Arkansas travel. So enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks for sharing your enthusiasm and your love of that part of Arkansas with
Well,
us.
thank you, Dean. I appreciate it. And everybody come see us in Arkansas.
And now it's time for the Mississippi Minute. I'm just home from a trip through Mississippi and Arkansas to visit some of the public lands along the Mississippi. On the second to last day, I pulled into Arkansas Post National Memorial just as the lone staff person was pulling down the American flag. It was another hot day in the low 90s, but that was still nearly 10 degrees cooler than it had been earlier in the week. I appreciated the cool down, such as it was. I'd been to Arkansas Post once before, but that was probably 7 years ago. This time around, I wanted to walk around the prairie restoration I'd read about. Arkansas Post was at the southern end of what was known as the Grand Prairie, a rare section of grassland that had evolved in an area that gets on average around 50 inches of rain a year, which is far more than grasslands typically get. The thing is, the hard clay soil makes it tough for trees to take root, and the occasional fires, many of them historically intentionally set by indigenous people to manage those grasslands, also kept the landscape favorable for grasses and prairie plants. I was looking forward to finding out how many plants I might recognize in this Grand Prairie restoration after all the prairies I had visited earlier in the summer along the upper Mississippi. So you can imagine my disappointment when the staff person at the National Memorial told me that there are actually two Arkansas posts, and the prairie restoration was at the other one. Well, it's what's called the Arkansas Post Museum, which is run by the state of Arkansas, and just was about to close as I was speaking to this staff person. Oh well. Since I wasn't going to make it to the other side on time, I walked the grounds of the National Memorial, which is in a beautiful setting. Wetlands border one side, which provides space for egrets and other birds to hang out among the lotuses. The Arkansas River moseys past another part of the National Memorial, and it's visible from an overlook at the end of a path. As I walked back to my car, I passed two armadillos scavenging in the turf. So while I didn't get to see the prairie restoration, I finally got to see an armadillo in their three-dimensional mobile form, and I thought they were adorable. So that's not a bad substitute. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to the series on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss out on future episodes. I offer the podcast for free, but when you support the show with a few bucks through Patreon, you help keep the program going. Just go to patreon.com/Dean Klinkenberg. If you want to know more about the Mississippi River, check out my books. I write the Mississippi Valley Traveler guidebooks for people who want to get to know the Mississippi better. I also write the Frank Dodge Mystery Series that's set in places along the river. Find them wherever books are sold. The Mississippi Valley Traveler podcast is written and produced by me, Dean Klinkenberg. Original music by No Offense. See you next time.